Hi everyone, I think I'm live. Welcome, welcome. I can see Heather Jackson there already. Fantastic. Welcome to another edition of my series of live streams from Paris. If you can't bring yourself to Paris, I'm going to bring Paris to you. And today I'm going to bring you a very special part of Paris that you're also fond of, at least virtually in our mind's eye. As you can see, it's already a little bit different here. I'm in the jungle as usual, which is my favorite live stream spot lately from my backyard. And as you can see, we're going to have going in a minute a bit of a slideshow of just some visuals to help us get in the mood. I've got 2 café crème here and a Nutella crepe that I've made that I'll show everybody in a minute. I'll just let you file in here. Welcome everybody. Bonjour to you all. I can see you there. I won't have your comments this time down on my iPad, but I will see them on my screen here. So hopefully I'll be able to keep up. I can never keep up, to be honest, but that's because you're all so lovely and enthusiastic with sending those comments and questions in. Hi Natalie Hayes, I can see you there. Heather says the hair gets more wild every week. Yeah, I mean, if you're just tuning into this whole thing, this is my quarantine coif and I'm growing it out until we're allowed to leave our houses. But I don't know, maybe I'll keep it after. I mean, it's just kind of going with it. I'm comfortable with all of you enough now to the point where I don't mind if my hair looks a little bit crazy. I do get strange looks from my own wife though, where she's like, what exactly are you doing? And I'm like, honey, it's called the quarantine coif. It's a thing. Don't worry about it. It's all good. And she's like, yeah, okay. So I'm telling you, one day I'm going to have that Fabio hair and she's going to realize I was on the right track the whole time. Okay, everybody, welcome. This is number 83, I think. I'm losing track. This is called the Sidewalk Cafe Q&A. I thought we would change it up a little bit. And, you know, it's been such a while since we've been able to just simply sit in a Paris cafe and chat and have a conversation and watch the world go by. So I thought that's what we would recreate a little bit today. In fact, it's way too warm for this. I just did this for effect. So I'm going to ditch the scarf. Sorry, but it's way too warm right now. Hi everybody, someone just said love the hair, so thank you whoever that was. So this is what I'm looking at right now. Let me go ahead and, that's the swing set. We're not going to talk about the swing set today. So I've got my Nutella crepe. It's just completely packed with Nutella, and then not 1 but 2 café crème. This second one I put in a glass cup because it'll last longer. This is the Bluetooth speaker that's going to provide us with our soundtrack in just a few moments. And then here I've got your lovely questions and my answers and whatnot. It seems blurry. Oh, there we go. Hopefully that wasn't all blurry to y'all. Only so many things we can control and keep track of here on the live streams. Let me dig into this crepe while we're at it. And then we'll get started with the questions and answers. I just realized I'm going to be shaking the whole table when I prepare this thing. Cheers to all of you who are eating your own treats right now and having your own coffee. And some of you are snuggled up in bed. Some of you are, God knows what you're doing, but thank you for being here at the same time. This is a cup. Barbara Saunier says, love watching you. Thank you, Christina Consolet, for the super chat. She says, it's the Kinder Fund. There are no Kinders here, but there will be later for our cafe chat. This is a shout out to Phyllis Cartwright, who is one of our Texan freaks. She sent me this Starbucks cup that's all about Texas, and I use it almost on the daily, Phyllis. So thank you to Madame Cartwright. So yeah, I guess we're here. We're doing it, right? Let's jump in. So I asked for your questions ahead of time. Leslie Wolf, very generous. Leslie sends a super chat and says, this is for the haircut if you want. I appreciate that. So let's just jump right into it. Now, I counted there were 46 questions that came in. So obviously I can't get to them all. We're not going to do a 4-hour live stream here. But that just means that I'm going to save these. I did record all of your questions. I'm going to save them for later and we'll break it up. But I did, a few of them jumped out at me. And I thought I'd just run through them. That's why we're here. So why don't I start this? It's just going to be a little slideshow. These are all my photos, by the way, at about 10-second intervals, just to give us a feel. These are all from the streets of Paris, and they are chairs and tables and views and pastries and coffees and cappuccinos and stuff that I've been photos that I've thought were worth taking over the years. So that's gonna, oh, and also speaking of the mood, how about a little bit of this? Hopefully you can all hear that. Ah, now it's official. Heather Liebhart says, lovely photos right off the bat. So let's get started. The first question that caught my eye is from the lovely Diana Booth Ranke. And I can see Lisa Chorney says, ooh, love it. Set in the mood, Lisa, set in the mood with the coffee and the Nutella. Almost like the real thing, not quite as good as being in a cafe, but let's get to the question that Diana Ranke sent me. Do you remember the first thing that you ate in Paris? If you do, what was it and where did you have it? The thing is, Diana, when I'm asked about the first thing I ate in Paris, it's actually memorable not because it was great or amazing or tasty or the location was special. It's because it was a pain in the butt, honestly. First time I came to Paris was 2007. I had never left the US. My mom had to buy me a passport, and I was with my mom. And we were just landed. It was a red-eye flight, and we were jet-lagged and tired and kind of stressed and kind of sick. I know some of you know that feeling well. And where you just want everything to go right when you finally touch down. And everything was new to me. I'd never been, again, out of the States. And all we wanted was an American-style breakfast. And we foolishly, I don't know if some of you have thought this as well, we foolishly thought that we could just grab an American-style breakfast that we were used to on the streets of Paris. And we went around and around and around and looked at every menu that we could find. And we were just, like I said, tired, stressed, sick. Couldn't find it. No eggs, no bacon. So I remember that first meal. God knows where it was. I think it was probably in the 10th arrondissement. And I was like, what is this thing with bread and just bread and butter and jam? Thought that was kind of odd. Now I realize how damn lucky I was to have something like that. But at the time, it was just a disappointment. So that answers your question. A disappointing first meal, but it shouldn't have been. It was just not what I was expecting, and I'm sure some of you had been through that. Daniel Molden says, no Egg McMuffins. Christina Consolet says the cafe shots are glorious. Appreciate that. Thank you. Lynn Sakai has a lovely question that came in. I wanted to answer it for Lynn. She says, what are the 3 top cafes that you will make a beeline to when the lockdown ends? I would think, Lynn, honestly, that I would go to the cafes that would make me feel the most like I was back into my normal routine, because that's what we're all sort of seeking, right? And it would be the cafes that make me feel like almost like all of this bad crap never happened, and it was just a blip on the radar. So for me, that would be La Caféothèque in the 4th arrondissement, right next to the Seine River. La Caféothèque, if you know me at all, you may have heard me talk about it. It's my #1 coffee shop. More in the modern style of a barista-style cafe, but always international and fun, and they speak English, and I mean, that's not why you would go, but it's just a really relaxed vibe, artists and writers and stuff hanging out there with their laptops and things. So I'd go to the Caféothèque because it would make me feel like, oh, I'm back in the flow. Also, by the same token, Malongo Cafe on the Rue Saint-André-des-Arts, 6th arrondissement. That would make me feel like I was back in the flow. And then also Le Relais de la Butte it's coming up here on one of the photos. It's on the top of the hill of Montmartre, and it looks out over the city, all these white chairs lined up near where Picasso's old studio was, Le Bateau Lavoir. I know some of you know it. And there's something about that where you get to look back down over the city, and that for me would feel like I'm in the heart of what Paris is supposed to be. This photo right here is La Caféothèque. Rather hip gentleman there working. Danielle Molden just sent a super chat for your next croque madame. Thank you, Danielle. Super chats are a thing. I didn't give the spiel this time around, but if you want to give me a tip or a donation or buy me a haircut, then you can do that by clicking the $sign in the comment section. Lest I forget this crepe, sorry, I'm going to shake the table a little bit. Let's see what you're all saying here. Lisa says, love me a good croque madame. Well, so Lynn, hopefully I answered your question. The cafes I would go to were the ones that would make me feel like I'm getting back to some normalcy. And by the way, good coffee, especially in those first 2 I mentioned. Don't talk with your mouth full. First cafe comes already done. Should have made 3 of these bad boys. Christine Surrett, you're the next question that piqued my interest. She says, what was your moment when you first felt like a local in Paris? A lot of us that travel a lot think about this often. And what I like about Christine's comment is she didn't just ask what was the first time you felt like a local, but this is a good choice, Christine. She added, and is it important to you to feel this way? And that's such a great question, Christine. Is it important to feel like a local, or should we welcome the feeling of being a tourist all the time? You know what I mean? So I wanted to speak to that. There is a moment where I feel like I was a local. In other words, they were treating me like I wasn't a foreigner. They were kind of welcoming me in and helping me appreciate their culture. And I did a blog post about this that I'll have to pop the link into the description afterward. It was, you know, the Beaujolais Nouveau wine that comes out every November right around Thanksgiving time? And it's the very fresh wine from that year, and some people love it, some people hate it, but it's always an event, the selling of the release of the Beaujolais Nouveau, and it's in all of the bars across France. And it's just an excuse to go and try it and see what the year's vintage tastes like. This was many years ago, this was my first or second year in Paris, and I was still so green. I went into this random cafe, it was in the center of town, I don't even remember the name, but I took a photo. And I went in and I asked for the Beaujolais Nouveau, and I was trying to use my best French and act like I belonged there, and I was alone. And I was sipping it, and the bartender, young guy, said in French, "So, what do you think?" And I was like, "Oh, pas mal, you know, not bad," trying to kind of think about what I could say about this wine and impress this guy. And he immediately said, "You know what? That Beaujolais Nouveau, it's never really that good. Let me show you something that's good." And so he proceeded to bring this bartender like 3 or 4 bottles of all of his favorite wines from behind the bar. And he just pulled out the glasses and he gave me like a little tasting, and I was like, wow, this is where I want to be. I want to be in a place where an impromptu wine tasting can just bust out at any time. And I felt like he was really welcoming me rather as someone who's appreciative and, you know, like, hey, let's just hang out, man, and let's try these wines, and I'm going to show you the ropes, as it were. So that's what stuck out to me, Christine. And is it important to me to be, I gotta take a sip of coffee before I answer that one. Diana Ranke says, I need to make madeleines. Yeah. Oh, I guess you saw the madeleines come up. Yeah, beautiful. No, it's not important. It used to be important to me to be a local. And to answer your question, Christine, it's not anymore. I think to be a local by definition means that you've lost some of that magic, some of the wonder and the excitement and the discovery. And I'm learning more and more through my projects here and what I create online, is that I'm kind of addicted to learning new stuff and trying new stuff and always not being on even footing and having to figure something out. And I think that's a good space to be in. Maybe it ties into the whole artistic mindset. But yeah, I think wanting to learn and experiment and having that feeling of what's around the next corner and wow, you know, you should always be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Becoming a local almost implies that you've lost some of that magic. And so I say, for myself and for all of you, just keep being a tourist, embrace it. That's why as a tour guide, I don't make that mistake of denigrating tourists and being like, oh, don't go there, there's too many tourists, because I'm a tourist whenever I go to different places as well. We all are. And in a way, we should all be, I mean, not to get existential about it, but I should be a tourist in my own backyard. I should enjoy all of this around me and act like it's the first time. And so that's what I try to do as a tour guide. That's what I encourage all of you to do. Sorry, Super Chat's coming up. Don't want to miss him. Leslie Wolf says, oh, for a haircut. Sorry, we saw that one. Lynn Sakai says, this is for your first cafe creme or two at La Caféothèque. Aw. Lynn asked a question and then came right in with a Super Chat. That's sweet of you. Laura Miralez sent a generous little tip as well. Really appreciate that, guys and girls. Betty Goldick is a question that I wanted to answer. She says, how much better is the air quality in Paris now that there are fewer cars? Betty, I'm not sure of the stats, but I do know that it is significantly better, the air quality in Paris, because we have, a lot of people don't know there's that dark side of Paris that we do have peaks of pollution that are bad. Not like China bad and stuff like that, those parts are super, but getting close enough that it's an issue. And when our second daughter, Tess, was born with asthma, I thought about that. I was like, are we kind of responsible for raising her here? And we actually don't live super far from a highway and autoroute. And so all of that combined, I was thinking, you know, I feel a little bit guilty. I hope that's not why little Tess has asthma. But not only has the air pollution gotten better and less, but Tess is feeling better. Tess is less sick than she has been in her previous 2 years on this planet. So maybe there's a correlation, maybe there's not. I'm not a doctor, but we have noticed that even people, we send photos to relatives, family members, and they're like, Tess is looking better than usual. So There you go. If Tessa's lungs appreciate it, then it's good enough for me. Someone saying, cut the wheat from Tessa's diet. All right, I'm going to send you my wife's personal email, who has been French all of her life. And I'll let you be the one to tell her that her kid can't eat bread or crêpe or pastries. I'll let you. You might be right. You might be 100% right, but I think we'll agree that you can send that email. Speaking of. Betty is thanking me for the answer. I will piggyback onto that, Betty, by saying that our mayor, Anne Hidalgo, who has always been really gung-ho during her term to reduce pollution in a big way, she's not going to let all the cars come back immediately. I saw just a headline, so I'm not an expert on this matter, but apparently they're going to try to ease the cars back into Parisian life, and I wouldn't be surprised if the mayor uses this as a way to further her agenda. Some people hate the agenda. Uber drivers, delivery people, cabbies, obviously they hate not being able to drive around in town. But as a tour guide and a cyclist, a bicyclist, I'm a fan. Let's move on. Patricia Katz, this is a quick hitter. Hi, Patricia Katz. This is to you. She says, what about courtyard cafes where you can, like a courtyard or garden type setting where you can get away from the hubbub? Something popped into my mind immediately, Patricia, and if you don't know about this, I want you to go there. It's called Le Café Suédois. Suédois is the French word for Swedish. So S-U-E-D-O-I-S, Suédois, the Café Suédois. It's right in the heart of the Marais. It's near the Musée Carnavalet, if you know that. And the street itself is called the Rue Payenne, P-A-Y-E-N-N-E, Payenne. Looks like Payenne, but it's Payenne. So yeah, that Café Suédois is just one of those old hôtel particulier courtyards, and it's converted into a really quite a nice local cafe. And it's not too busy, it's not too touristy, you know. See, I caught myself, that was a joke. That was to test you all. It's okay if there are tourists there. We don't mind. We are all tourists. Hope I'm not missing stuff, honestly. I get into my own world, you know me. Dreama Tolperi is here. Hi, Dreama. What a great friend Dreama is, an amazing artist. She says, love the stories and intimate feeling of your chats. It makes Paris feel closer. Aw. Well, I like feeling close to you, Dreama. You're really a fantastic person. Absolute inspiration. I encourage anyone who's interested in art to follow Dreama Tolperi. She's got amazing courses, online courses, where you can tap into her great energy. And I always find myself sliding into a full-blown sales pitch when I talk about you, because you're just that lovely and that deserving and that authentic. So yeah, check her out. Postcards from Paris is a painting course online that I was part of. You'll see a little bit of me in her painting course, Postcards from Paris. Christina Consolet, the lovely Christina Consolet, who launched our Free TV private network on Zoom last night with a book reading. Christina, thank you for doing that. Thank you for starting the first Free TV episode. She says, how did you pick up your French? Was it schooled or through living, or a combo platter of both? I love the way that you talk, Christina. Was it a combo platter of both schooling and just living? I had only 1 year of high school French, Christina, and typical teenager back then, excuse me, I could care less. I was like, French, I'm never going to use this. This is just credits, right? Little did I know. So that didn't really help me, the proper schooling. And I've, in fact, never been someone who was, I've never taken to like classes and actual proper instruction. That may be to my detriment, so I'm not saying it's right for everybody. Some people thrive in a classroom setting. I never have. I've always been a self-learner, and I seem to strive and stay more focused and interested if I do it on my own terms, which can be a good thing or a bad thing. So what I did was I started out by, when I met Charlotte for the first time online, she's born and raised in Paris, I started to keep a notebook. And I encourage anybody who's trying to learn French to keep a notebook of random questions that you're in the shower and you're like, if I was in this situation, how would I say that? And you jot it down in English real quick. And maybe you can't find the answer right away, but even months or years down the road, you can go back and fill that in. So you'll have a nice little compendium eventually of not just stuff that a teacher told you would be useful, but the stuff in your own mind and your own imagination that you feel will be useful. Because if you're in the shower and you think, oh, how would I say this in that situation? If you're thinking it in the shower, you're probably going to wonder it when you're on the streets in that country wanting to say it. And so you're going to forget those little nuggets of the most useful stuff to you because it's what your brain is trying to work on subconsciously, if that makes sense. So keep that little compendium, that little notebook at all times, and you might not have all the answers, but keep a record of the questions you have so you don't forget them. That's what I did. And of course, getting to know Charlotte and dating her and eventually marrying her was a secret weapon. So maybe that's the short answer. Get yourself a significant other that's French. I know you already knew that, Christina. That's not a news flash. But I do have some extra tips for you, Christina. Pop the subtitles on any DVD that you have of shows that you like or movies that you like. Do it first, English sound, and then just have the French subtitles going, and don't even pay much attention to them, just have them be there. It helps if you know the story ahead of time. If it's like, we use the show Friends, because Charlotte is a huge Friends fanatic, and we've got all 10 seasons on DVD. So I did that, and then also, and if you get daring, every now and then you can either go French sound and English subtitles, so you can kind of read what's going on, but you can hear it internally, or you can go French and French. It just all depends, but there are no wrong answers. Just make sure that some version of some combo platter of those subtitles and the audio are churning away. And then lastly, more specifically, I used a podcast when I was trying to learn called Learn French by Podcast. Google it. Maybe I'll find a link for the description here. Learn French by Podcast. Back in the day, a lot of their lessons were free. And what I really loved about it is, first, podcasts are great. You can have them in the background when you're doing stuff, but they would start with a short conversation from start to finish with two native speakers. And then they would do the conversation twice. I think they'd repeat it for you, and then they'd go and break it down. Like, this is what this sentence meant, and then this is what this person said, and then they'll go through everything and the vocab and the grammar. This is what the structure of that conversation was, and then at the end they'll play it again once or twice. So by the end of every episode, at the beginning I had no idea what was being said, and even by the end of that short episode, when they played it again at the end, I thought, oh, okay, now I know 8% more than I knew that first time around 15 minutes ago. And so Learn French by Podcast, check it out. And even if you have to pay for it nowadays, pay for it. What are y'all saying? Keith, and Keith, I always have trouble with your name, Hate Key or Hate Key. He says, as always, your photographs are stunning. I'm glad. I hope we don't run out of photographs or music during all this. Probably will. Jean-Pierre says, enjoying my Folgers Café au lait with you this morning in Minnesota. Cheers to you. Did I miss any super chats? That Lucienne Despota, did I mention you? She says, pour ta coupe de cheveux. So another tip for my haircut. Thank you, Lucienne. Beautiful name, Lucienne. Wish I could have named one of my daughters that. Let's move on. Lisa Chorney, the lovely Lisa Chorney. Oh, and by the way, Christina, I saw this in my notes because I did prepare myself here. The biggest hurdle when it comes down to learning French, and I say this to anybody who ever asks, it's the psychological aspect. This was my hurdle. It doesn't matter how much you learn. It's like, I've used before the learning piano analogy because I've always tried to learn piano. It doesn't matter what you can do when you're alone. I mean, I guess it makes you feel good about making progress. But when it comes to things where there is an interaction, an implied interaction with somebody down the road, you got to jump in with those interactions. Like, that needs to be your playground. You're never as stupid as you think they think you are, right? They just don't care as much as you think. And you've got to get over the psychological hurdle and just be like, okay, sometimes I'm going to sound a little bit odd, but then I'm going to learn that lesson and I'm going to move on. It's absolutely key. Any of you, if you want to, I know Bob Kalinsky, you're out there and you're earnestly trying to learn French. Work on that, man. I'm not saying that you aren't, but everybody should be working on this part. Get drunk if you have to. Hey, Leslie T, thanks for the super chat. She says, I'm enjoying this chat. I appreciate that. The Nutella vibes. We've had like 4 days of rain, nonstop, so it feels good to be out here. It's quiet, the neighbors aren't bothering me. Back to the lovely Lisa Chorney. This is a good question. how did your expectation, no, yeah, we'll do this. How did your expectation of French life, like when you first moved here and the ideas you had about how it would be, how's that compared to the reality of it? Were there any letdowns or pleasant surprises? Here's a pleasant surprise. Some of you have heard this story, but not all. I'd love to tell this story. When I was young, I don't know why, I was obsessed with British culture. I was obsessed particularly with the British accent, like the London accent, and I wanted to speak with a British accent, maybe because all the singers that I admired had that accent, etc. And of course, it would be stupid for me as a 15-year-old boy to be walking around with a British accent. That wasn't going to fly. So I was always a little bit sad I wouldn't get the accent, but you know what happened? When I moved here, it was completely unexpected. I started speaking French and learning and whatnot, and of course I had an accent when I spoke French to people. And more, the locals started to ask me in French, "Are you from England? You sound like you have a British accent when you speak." Because turns out when you're speaking a language like French, the accent that you would have with particularly the sounds of the R, you know, the well, we don't do that very well in America or in Britain, turns out. Or in Great Britain. So they would mistake me for being a Brit when I spoke French. So isn't that cool how the universe works some ways? I always wanted the British accent, but I had to learn a second language to beat around the bush and find it in another way. But I did in the end get that accent, at least according to some people. And I love that. I hope I never lose it. So that was something that was a pleasant surprise. Karine Mateo says the music is awesome. You'll have to let us know what's playing. I will put the music credits in the description when I get around to it later today. Oh, and so there you go, pleasant surprise, Lisa, for you. But also, here's a slightly more negative one. Because, you know, people, I wonder if sometimes they get sick of me only focusing on the good stuff about Paris. Because of course there are going to be downsides. I thought, this was disappointing. I thought that the French would convert me a little bit more when it comes to relaxing, smelling the roses, sitting in a cafe. Oh, did this reset? Let me start this over. Sitting in a cafe and just watching the world go by and, I'm not in a hurry, I'm not stressed, I don't have to get to the next thing. I have been converted to that philosophy, but not as much as I thought. There's still American blood coursing through my veins, we'll put it this way. So if I'm in a restaurant or a cafe and I'm not completely loving hanging out with friends or having a conversation or whatnot, I'm kind of like, okay, let's go, like, I need the check now, like, hello, you should take my order, you know what I mean? And I don't say that that's good, but I think it's the American in me that I thought would have been diluted completely by now, but maybe they'll, old habits die hard. So I would say that is something a bit on the negative side that I expected I would chill out a little bit more. Maybe that's because, maybe it's because I decided to become an entrepreneur / content creator and turn myself into a brand. Maybe that was my downfall. Because that ensures that you will never chill out. You're always moving on to the next thing, but that's all right. You know what else I didn't expect, or I thought would be better? I know all of you have this dream. I'll move to France and everything's so close. I'll just hop on a train and I'll just bounce all over the place, right? I'm going to travel all through Europe for pennies on the dollar. It didn't quite work out that way. I imagine that too, but life gets in the way, and jobs, and certainly family eventually, and all of that. And sometimes it's not as cheap as you thought it would be, or it's not as easy to get away and set up a 3-day weekend as you thought it would be. So yeah, I would say that if I had to choose stuff that didn't go according to plan, it would be, I thought I would travel on a whim more often. When I tell people the places I've been in Europe nowadays, it might sound impressive, but you got to realize that's over the course of a decade. So actually, a little underwhelming as far as the places I've been able to go to. Not complaining though. Speaking of the American in me, let's pizza this crepe. Stone cold by now, as is my coffee, but it's all good. Oh my goodness. Keith, now I feel bad that I can't pronounce your name, because you got to tell me, you got to teach me, man, because Keith has sent me $100. It says MX, so it's $100 in Mexico? 100? Maybe that's 100 pesos? I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know. But thank you so much, Keith, for 100 of your currency. I appreciate that. He's done that twice. Thank you to Keith. So let's see, did I answer you, Lisa? Yeah. Okay, there you go, Lisa Chorney. Here's one. Robin Fertile Ward, I wanted to answer this question. She says, what has been your most memorable moment as a tour guide? And Robin, that is such a great question. Here's a funny one. I think you're all going to enjoy this story. And this is why it's memorable. This is one of those things where I'm like, I just want to pull my hair out. It's so embarrassing, but of course funny now. I used to work for a company giving tours for them as a hired hand. I would give day tours. It was an 8-hour tour where I would private tour. I'd meet the clients privately in the morning, spend 8 hours with them, taking them all around town, having lunch with them, etc. So it was a good chunk of interaction. Had a couple of clients, they were newlyweds. They were a little bit younger than me even, and they were just like really excited to be in Paris. It was their honeymoon and whatnot, and it was kind of an exciting vibe, and we clicked and we got along really well. Did the morning tours and whatnot. Excuse me. Had lunch. Went into the afternoon and we visited the opera house, the Opera Garnier. It was a very, very hot day, middle of the summer. And I always carried with me some spray sunscreen, right? And it was a clear liquid sunscreen. So you'd spray it and it looked like water, right? And I'd keep it in my bag so I wouldn't get burnt in the face. So I'd always kind of like in the morning before I went to work at the house, I would just, and then run out the door and it would dry. We're at the opera house, halfway through this 8-hour tour with these lovely newlyweds. I pop in the bathroom because I gotta, I'm finishing in the bathroom, washing my hands, and I'm like, I should reapply some sunscreen. So I reach into my bag and go and meet them, and we do the rest of the 4 or 5 hours of the day, and then I go home. Unbeknownst to me, and this is where it gets ridiculous, the sunscreen I had in my bag that day wasn't the clear kind. It was the opaque white sunscreen. And I didn't think to look in the mirror because I used to always just spray it and go. So can you imagine, I come home after this tour, I look in the mirror in my house, I look like Joaquin Phoenix from the Joker movie. I look like some kind of disgruntled mime that's been sweating out under the hot sun all day. Laura Poffenberger says ghost tours. Lori Dean, Heather Liebhart, you're all cracking up. I know, right? Isn't this insane? You can imagine the pit I had in my stomach when I saw that. And I was like, I must have looked ridiculous. Going into the opera house bathroom, completely normal. Coming out to my clients, I can see everyone with their LOLs. Coming out to the clients saying, all right, let's go. How about Montmartre, Can you imagine that? And I was covered. And it was probably dripping down throughout the afternoon. And of course, these lovely young newlyweds didn't have they were too polite to make me feel bad, or maybe they just thought it's what I do every day. So tell me that isn't an embarrassing tour guide moment. That's just, thank God that was a couple of years ago, so it's easy to laugh, but yeah. Now, Robin, I have another, that was the funny answer. I have another answer for you though. And I'm actually going to pause the music because it's, when you talk about the meaningful parts of my experience as a tour guide, I used to give tours of World War II, of the Nazi occupation. And I used to tell this story that was so moving to me, I wanted to share it. I had heard of it and I wanted to share it with others. And almost every time that I told this story, the group started to break down and cry. But cry in a sort of beautiful, like, oh, isn't humanity wonderful type of way. And so that's why I'm stopping the music here, because I thought just for a moment, I would share that story that I would tell during this tour that was so moving for my clients and moving for me as well, because it's a story of the human spirit, and I think that maybe we all could use a bit of that right now. This is a story that you can find, and I encourage you to go and go to the source of the story. I'm going to paraphrase it. There is a series on YouTube called Human or Humans. But there is an old Jewish woman, a French woman, who is still alive today. Her name is Francine Christophe. And you can see her. So if you type Human, Francine Christophe, you're going to see her telling the story. But here's what I would mention in front of the Holocaust Memorial, the Shoah Memorial. And it's a sad story with a beautiful ending, a tearjerker. And that's why it's just so memorable to me. Francine was 8 years old when she was, as a Jewish girl, she and her mother were being taken to one of the concentration camps, to Bergen-Belsen. And at that time, Francine recounts it, all the families were scrambling together to get a few items in a bag that they could bring with them, a bit of rice or sugar or family heirloom or a blanket. And she remembers that her mom took a couple of small pieces of chocolate. And she said to Francine, who was all of 8 years old, she said, listen, we're going to save this chocolate because we're going to be going to a place that might be difficult sometimes. And whenever you're having a bad day and you're sad and you can't take it anymore, I'm going to pull out a little piece of this chocolate for you to lift your spirits. And Francine said, okay, Mom. So they're taken to Bergen-Belsen, this camp, and they befriend another Jewish person there, in prison there. And her name was Helen. And Helen falls pregnant, although you wouldn't know it because she was so malnourished and sickly that she was just like wafer thin with a little baby bump. But they got to know each other very well. And when it was time for Helen to give birth in the barracks in Bergen-Belsen, Francine's mom pulled her aside and says, listen, how are you feeling right now? And Francine says, I'm okay. The mom says, what do you think about giving your chocolate to Helen, helping her get through this difficult labor? And Francine's like, you know what, I'm doing okay. Go ahead, give her my chocolate. And they did. Baby was born. Everyone survived. The baby didn't make a sound for 6 months. But 6 months after, the camp was liberated by the Allies. And Francine says that they heard the baby cry out for the first time. After 6 months of being silent and everybody wondering if the baby was okay, it was almost as if that day of that liberation of the camp, the baby had actually been born. And that was when its life had begun. And they heard it cry for the first time and make sounds. But that's not the end. She grew up, Francine. Everybody was released. They went back to their lives. She went back to her professional life in the world of mental health. Okay? She was giving a big conference, and she was on stage talking in front and giving a lecture, and invited doctors were coming up to talk. One of the doctors is from Marseille, a psychiatrist, I believe, and she gets up on the stage and she says to everybody, before I give my speech today, my lecture, there's one person I have something for, and she points out Francine in the audience, and she reaches into her pocket, and this lady pulls out a chocolate bar, and she says to Francine, I'm the baby. And it was. It was the baby that survived and heard the story. I'm getting choked up just talking about it. Had heard that story from her own mother, and even though hadn't seen Christine for decades, managed to track her down and say, you know what, thanks. And it was an amazing moment of humanity, and it's a reminder, and I would tell that in the store on my tour, because as you can imagine, a World War II occupation tour is dark. And I wanted to remind people on my tour that there were moments of incredible heroism and courage and sacrifice and love, sometimes coming from an 8-year-old girl who gave up what must have been one of the only things that would lift her spirits in this concentration camp, to just give up your candy. And so I love that story, and that's Francine Christophe, and you can find her on YouTube if you search for her. So that's why I stopped the music, and now we'll go back to the rest of the answers, but I just thought that's memorable, Robin. That's something those are memories that I'll take with me, for the rest of my days. Robin, I can see Robin herself saying thanks for sharing. And then it would give me an opportunity at the end of the tour, like an hour later, to be like, okay, everybody, well, that's it. We've laughed, we've cried. I hope you have a nice day and you enjoyed the tour. But just beautiful stuff. Reminds you that humans can be really good sometimes as well. Catherine's asking me if I ever take anyone to Drancy, the former internment camp. No, I do not, but I'm sure somebody does. Danielle Molden says, I love this, and she says, yes, this is how we survive this. Yeah, I was thinking, do I tell that story and risk being a bit, bringing the mood down? But I think it's a great story for this time of what we're going through. Back to the answers and the questions and whatnot. Jacqueline Romo, I know you're out there, Jacqueline, beautiful member of our community. She says, what's one place in Paris that just makes your heart full and your soul sing every time you go there? I'd be curious to know in the comments how you all would answer this question, actually. So in Jacqueline's words, what makes your heart full and your soul sing? I really had to think about this, Jacqueline, because there are canned answers, like canned responses that are a little bit obvious, but then I had to dig deep and I'd be like, what's the spot that really gets to me? There's a church that people don't really notice that much. It's called Saint-Nicolas du Chardonnay. And Chardonnay is not quite spelled like the wine, like Chardonnay wine, but it's kind of close. Saint Nicolas du Chardonnay, and it's in the Latin Quarter. I was coming to Paris as a tourist, and I was getting to know Charlotte, flying back and forth long-distance relationship. And during one of those trips, I was my flight was due, and I just had time for like 10 more minutes of a walk. And you know that idea of like, I really should go, but I want to experience more Paris. Like, I really should go, but just 5 more minutes, just 5 more minutes. And I forced myself. I was late, and I thought, you know what? I don't know if I'm going to ever come back here again. I don't know if I'm ever going to come back to Paris and see this girl, Charlotte, and maybe this is the end of the story, you know? We don't know, and I felt bad about that. So I forced myself 5 more minutes before my flight, and I turned the corner, and I saw the back of this church, and I was like, wow. I was like, around every corner, there's something amazing, and what if I miss all the rest? You know, what if I miss, there's so much, and what if I miss it? What if I don't come back, you know? But I did. I came back in a big way, obviously. So obviously that's that church, the back of that church specifically. The front doesn't do it for me, but it's the specific view of the back of Saint Nicolas du Chardonnay. And I always feel that. It always gets me in the feels every time I see the back of that church. I mean, what if my life took a different turn after that and I never came back to Paris? I mean, it's just ridiculous, this life that I've been blessed with, and all of you. I mean, yeah. And I feel for people that have that feeling. I empathize with people who, for some of them, Paris is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. And they either don't think they're going to come back, or in some instances, they know they're not going to come back for one reason or another. And I really empathize with that. Anyway, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. Nutella crepe. Told myself I wouldn't cry during this. I mean, it's just a freaking cafe Q&A. I mean, what the hell? Sarah Warner, if you could spend a week anywhere in France, where would it be? You know, Sarah, we've all got those places that when we say, oh, I haven't been there, I haven't done that yet, people are like, what? Are you kidding me? How could you have not done that? For me, that's Mont Saint-Michel. It's in Normandy, Brittany area, and it's not that hard to get to. And I know a lot of tourists who come to Paris, a lot of travelers, they will make a trip out there, and it's magnificent apparently, but I've never been. So I would like to spend, you said, where would you like to spend a week? I'd like to go there. Because as far as I understand, it's much better once the crowds are gone. So if you're there in the morning or at night, which means spending a night or two is really where it's at. So Mont Saint-Michel is where I would go. G. Lee Anderson has a question that I wanted to answer. Do you notice any difference in the health of people in France compared to the USA? When we go to France, we have the feeling that French people are healthier than Americans. And which healthcare system do you prefer? This is a slippery slope to talk about this, but I will just give my own personal experience. I am healthier for sure since I moved here, and I didn't know that it happened until I had been here for a couple of years and I looked at older photos of when I first arrived. And I was a bit shocked because I looked at those photos of myself and I thought, wow, I was bloated back then. You know, I just kind of looked a little bit, you know. Part of it was how I dressed, but it was absolutely a body thing. And that makes sense. Here, obviously, there's more food that is fresher. There are fewer, I mean, I don't know the stats, but there are generally fewer pesticides and even fortified vitamins. Some nutritionists have a theory that the bread in France, because it's not fortified with certain things like in the States, that there may not be a certain side effect. I mean, again, don't quote me on any of this. I'm just sharing things that I've heard. I know that people can eat bread here, but not in other places, so there might be a correlation there. And then they don't eat as much, you know, they don't eat as often. Here, like to eat in between meals, they look at you like you're an alien. When I had a job where I had to move on the metro between 2 different jobs and I had to eat my lunch in between, I would pack a little jambon beurre, like ham and butter sandwich with tin foil, and I'd be on the metro in between my 2 jobs, and I would unwrap it as I was riding on the metro. And I felt so guilty because people inevitably, they weren't mean about it, but they were looking at me like, dude's cracking open a tinfoil sandwich on the metro. In New York, that would be no big deal because I did it in New York all the time. But here, you definitely notice that difference. So hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, so I'm healthier in general. Rebecca Walsh. How accessible is Paris if you require a walker? You'll be happy to know, Rebecca, that even though you're not wrong if you say that Paris is bad for limited mobility travelers, you wouldn't be wrong to say that because escalators, elevators, and stuff, Paris is still lacking with that. So I'm not going to try to paint it in that light. But I will have you know that I've given several walking tours out on the streets to people with limited mobility. That might be walkers, crutches, mobilized scooters, mobilized wheelchairs. I have done that, particularly in neighborhoods like the Marais. I've given tours like that. In the Latin Quarter, Saint-Germain-des-Prés. If you stay within the arrondissement in the center, like number 1 through 7, you'll find pretty much flat land. Getting into churches is sometimes tough because there are often staircases to get into a church. But I say don't let it deter you because I've actually given walking tours and we've had a great time with folks with walkers and whatnot. Heather Liebhart, I won't go too much longer, it's 46 minutes here. We've got a really fun cafe chat to get to, a champagne chat. Heather Liebhart says, what kind of discovery gives you the chills or the happy dance? That kind of feeling where you're just like, oh yeah. And it's nothing specific, Heather, but hopefully this will be sufficient. I wanted to give you the more of a general answer of whenever I notice something that I should have noticed a long time ago, but I didn't. So a street that I thought that I knew, I thought I had gotten to the bottom of it and I could file that away as the parts of Paris that were mine. All of a sudden you look up and there's something carved into a thing or something and you're like, that's what gives me the chills. And I think the reason is because it's a reminder of something that I already sort of knew. The city will always surprise me. And as not just a lover of the discovery, but a guy who bases his career on it, that's exciting to me. This slideshow of photos was not nearly long enough. I thought it was like 150 photos or something if you're counting. So I think we'll wrap things up there. I got a lot of other questions I didn't have a chance to get to, but I'll save them for, maybe we'll do another Sidewalk Cafe Q&A. Okay, folks, well, it looks like the music's winding down. I want to thank you for this. Now, if you're a Patreon member, supporter, we're going to have a champagne chat with not one, not two, but 3 guests, Heather Jackson, James Jackson, and Bob Kalinsky. I'm going to need 10 minutes or so to set that up via Zoom, and we're going to drink a lot of champagne and have a chat and whatnot. And if you're not a Patreon supporter, I suggest you check out the link and see what that entails. Help me continue this project and help me continue to bring you a new version of Paris every week. And I hope you're all doing all right out there. Hope you're feeling good in here and up here. So I think we're going to wrap this one up. Stop the old slideshow. Imagine, by the way, this photo here. That is in Montmartre. And it's a crêperie that puts their tables out every now and then. And so if you catch them at the right time of day, you can literally, there are apparently no cars on that street, you can literally sit at one of those tables and eat your cup there. I mean, come on, that's better than any fantasy I could come up with. Lisa Cruz says, the slideshow and music, she said something good about it. Oh, have been truly enjoyable. Thanks, Corey. Thanks, everybody. Andrea Miles is going to go make a Bloody Mary for the champagne chat. All right, if you're watching on the replay, thank you as well. Hope you appreciated this, and I will catch you on the next video. Let's not drag out the goodbye as I am often wont to do. Hi, Haas Manning. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks, everybody, for your amazing questions. I will get to the rest of them on another episode. Take care. If you can't bring yourself to Paris, if you can't bring yourself to Paris, I'll bring Paris to you, or something like that. Ciao.